Thank you for tuning in to the Practical Preservation Podcast. Please take a moment to visit our website, practicalpreservationservices.com, for additional information and tips to help you restore your historical home. If you've not done so, please subscribe to us on iTunes, Stitcher, or SoundCloud, and also like us on Facebook. Welcome to the Practical Preservation Podcast, hosted by Danielle and Jonathan Kepperling. Kepperling Preservation Services is a family-owned business based in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, dedicated to the preservation of our built architectural history for today's use as well as future generations. Our weekly podcast provides you with expert advice specific to the unique needs of renovating a historic home, educating by sharing our From the Trenches preservation knowledge and our guests' expertise, balancing modern needs while maintaining the historical significance, character, and beauty of your period home.
Today on the Practical Preservation Podcast, I have Neil Rippingale from NR Stonecraft. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you very much, Danielle. It's a pleasure.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Tell me about your background.
Well, I started off as a young school kid in Scotland, in the southwest of Scotland, and I went to agricultural college after leaving school, and I was there for 3 years. So I spent probably the first 15 years of my career working in agriculture.
Okay.
And it was during this time working in agriculture that I was asked to do some dry stone repairs on the farm. And it's quite comical. When I did the repairs, it was probably the worst you have ever seen. And, I actually knew it was not correct, but what I was missing was some basic fundamentals. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until about a few years later, when I was 21, I had the very fortunate opportunity to work with probably one of the best in Scotland at that time. Was absolutely incredible. His name was Charles Jardine, and he had been a waller for 50 years, and his father before him.
Yeah.
And so I was taught old school, and I was frightened to touch a stone at one point working with him. But he actually gave me the basics. Now, once I had the basics, it was fantastic after that. I had a sort of flair and an aptitude for it. But it was later on when I was asked to do small repairs on the farm. You're working with livestock, you're working with machinery, crops, etc. And then periodically, you might be working with bricks, block, you might be working with a stone and a repair. So it was from there that I seemed to have this flair, and I was asked to do some repairs on a neighbouring farm. And from there, someone from the Agricultural Training Board at that time asked me if I would be able to do a repair. And then from there, it progressed and progressed. Then someone asked me to be an instructor with the Agricultural Training Board. And from there, I went through the certification process and I became an instructor. And I went into a few competitions. And just as a novice, and I started to beat the professionals. And I thought, wow, this is strange. I didn't expect that. So I seem to have a flair and an aptitude for it. And so it started off there. Now, at this point, it's still a hobby. And this hobby got out of control, and I went self-employed. And from that hobby, I managed to go self-employed within a 12-mile radius of my place near in Edinburgh this time. I've moved from southwest Scotland up into Edinburgh. From there, the 12-mile radius moved into 50-mile radius, and I started to train a lot of people, and they started to take on the work themselves. Then my 50-mile radius and 20-mile radius went into 300-mile radius.
Oh my goodness, yeah.
So I started teaching on the Western Isles of Scotland, and round about this time, I was asked to work in Nova Scotia. And this is where the international theme came in. So the international theme went from there to, I think the next place was Australia.
Oh my goodness.
1999. And then I went to Switzerland. I was there for 3 separate occasions. And then over to Seattle. And it was during my time working in Seattle that the Dry Stone Conservancy asked me if I'd be interested in working on a project. And that's basically the background. For my sins, it started as a hobby.
Yes. Well, I think that is great. And I think I talked to a lot of people doing the podcast in preservation. A lot of people this wasn't their first career. They, they
Yes.
chose something
Yep.
else, and then they kind of
Absolutely.
found this. Yes. As you were talking, I was curious because I know there's a lot of dry stone in America, like in New England. Did it mostly come from like Scotland and England, or was that where it mostly came from originally?
There's actually stonemasonry signatures all over the United States.
Right.
And for example, here in Kentucky and also in Tennessee, there is trades here of the Irish and the Scots settling here in the mid 1800s, because it reminded them of their home and the stone that they worked with back home in Ireland and Scotland.
Okay.
Now, certainly in the New England area, yes, there were farmers who would clear the land of the surplus stone. And there is one particular place in Connecticut that I've worked on many, many occasions. There is 5 different types of walling on the one property, and it's only 60 acres. So it started off as farmers just throwing the stone to the side.
Mm-hmm.
If it's near an entrance, the stone becomes more formal. They've cut the stone and shaped it. And there's consumption walls where there's just a massive stone to clear the land. So there's a few different styles there. But yes, they came over from Great Britain and settled there, obviously in New England. And but it's more a glacial boulder there. It's round stone.
Oh yeah.
They have some flat-bedded stone as well. Don't get me wrong. But this is the beautiful thing about dry stonework. There's such a variety of stonework. And I found that over the 33 countries that I've traveled to and the 43 states that I've worked in as well. So and that's one of the things that attracted me to it, is the variety of the stonework. It is a beautiful material to work with, and they all behave differently.
That makes sense though, that you can use all different types of stone, because the stone varies a lot. I mean, it's all the same material, but it's really not, because there's hard stone, there's soft stone, there's
exactly.
Yeah, very good. So what drew you into the dry stone masonry?
Well, apart from the hobby, I found it easy, and it was really rewarding. When I worked on agriculture to start with, if you plough a field, you can make a nice straight and level furrows, but it's only there momentarily, and then it's into a crop. It's the same with when you're cutting barley, wheat. If it's cutting grass for silage or hay, make beautiful straight lines. But once again, taking a pride in your work, it's only there momentarily. But when I started to do stonework, you can actually see the efforts of your labours, and it's very satisfying, not only to myself, but when you see the client is absolutely amazed at how this puzzle comes together. And so I think there's been a little bit of a blessing there for me, because people who have struggled for years, I found it quite easy. I don't mean to be complacent about that, but I did move up the certification chain, up the ladder very quickly, but that was due to hard work and determination over the years. And hence it's taken me all over the world, and here I am today. But no, I don't know if it's a calling, but it's certainly an aptitude. The best way I can explain it as well is it is more of a puzzle. And this might sound silly though, what I would finish off with here on this part was, when I look at the stone, it could be organized chaos to anybody who's not trained, but it took me a few years to master it, that every stone has a place. So the stone actually speaks to me. Now, I know that sounds silly, but it doesn't speak to me with a voice, but with its shape, its size, its color, its patina, everything there that helps me identify the stone and where it's placed in the wall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that I've heard other people that work with stone talk about that. So So that's very interesting. I think that having a natural talent towards something really helps too, and then it makes it a little bit easier.
Well, I think it doesn't matter what trade you're in, but if you're certainly interested, well, I did a lot of dedication in the early years. I was working on the farm from 4 a.m. till about 8 p.m, and I'm still doing stonework in between times.
Oh,
so
goodness, yeah.
If you want to be lackadaisical and laid back approach, then you'll only get out of it what you put into it.
Right.
So I put a lot of effort into it in the early days, which is rewarding now. But I'm not saying it's second nature, but I don't know. It's just there's sometimes I have to take a helicopter view of the situation and think, wow, where
Yes,
did I learn
yes.
all these ideas? And I have actually been very fortunate to learn from trainees and mentors and other peers, and I learn a lot from their mistakes. I don't tell them my mistakes.
But we all have them. Oh, none of us are perfect.
No,
I
no,
call
absolutely
those
not.
my public confessions when I have to
Oh,
tell somebody.
wow. Confessions of a Stonemason. That's a good title for a book there, isn't it?
So tell me about your work. Tell me, do you still train people? Do you actually go out and do the work also? So tell me about the work that you do.
Yes, I'd say it's a good question. When I was in Scotland years ago, I was there for 10 years. I've actually been in the States now more years than I was working in Scotland. But the teaching, as you can appreciate, came to a hold last year, came to a stop because of the COVID.
Yeah.
We could not do any training. Up until that point, though, we have actually taken a few workshops this year in training with the Dry Stone Conservancy, but I've trained over 7,200 students in 35 years of teaching. And that's a phenomenal amount. I've kept all the records of all these workshops that I've trained. And it's on everything from basic dry stone work to special features, arches, etc., and how to cut and dress stone, and even how to teach and train other instructors how to become instructors, because there is a psychology there on how to pass on your knowledge. So from there, the masonry work that we've done is I still do, yes, I do a lot of teaching. It's starting to pick up again this year. Done a lot of work with the National Park Service. They're absolutely amazing to work with. Very professional indeed. So yes, so my work still involves, it's pretty tough when you're there running your own business. You have to go and price your own work. So you're doing your estimates. Then from your estimates, you've got the work itself to line up, whether you need a one-man crew or whether it's more than one, up to even 10. Right. I did lead a team in Kentucky about 20 years ago with 25 stonemasons.
Oh my goodness.
That was a huge project. That was for the Dry Stone Conservancy, again, there for a mile and a half of stonework. And it's a bit intimidating starting on day one.
Oh, yes.
You can't see the end of the project. It's 2 years away.
Yes.
It's 2 years away. So, but you start off, what we did there though, again, this is a bit of psychology. It's daunting to even think of starting with 25 stonemasons on day one. It's just incomprehensible. So what we did was we started with 6 trainees and we had 1 supervisor for every 6 trainees. Then we progressed from there. 2 weeks later, we'd introduce another 6 trainees and put them through the same process. And again, we had another supervisor that would mentor and look after them. So before we knew it, we were up to actually 28, I think was maximum. But that's a lot of men to deal with.
That is,
and I should mention here, actually, it's equal opportunities. We've had quite a few females coming through,
that's great,
through the craft as well. And they'll be pleased to hear this, that their quality is sometimes a wee bit better than the men. They're more attention to detail.
That's what my dad always said. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So my work is also from putting out my invoices. I'm working with the men and I'm mentoring them at the same time. So it's ongoing training on site, and my customers and clients usually know that before I start. And any consultancy basis as well for large companies, quality control measures. Yeah. So there's a bit of variety there, as you can tell straight away from that point.
Do you still travel for work, or do you stay mostly in Kentucky?
That's a good question, actually, because I was just saying to someone last year, because COVID, I was very fortunate to be within my Louisville area where I'm actually based. I was so blessed. They were one of my best years, actually. It's kind of strange. I don't know what happened, but a lot of influential customers. And I was very lucky. Again, I think this part of this is a blessing because I was so fortunate to have all that work within my doorstep.
Yeah.
I had only one project for the National Park Service, and it was a logistical nightmare to get through all the states to get to it in Connecticut.
Yeah.
Because some states were closed down and the park wouldn't let people on unless you had a COVID test, etc., take your temperature. So I'd only one job last year out of state, but I've seen me working in 12 different states in the same year. Now, it's not it's not like an office job where I can go to the same place every day,
Right.
but I have to travel where the work is.
Yeah.
So this year, at the moment, we've spent 7 months already working at Maker's Mark Distillery in Loretto in the south, the West Kentucky here.
Okay.
So we're working there at the moment. So yes, I have to travel. There is a few other projects this year, not too far from a home base in Louisville. There's some in Ohio, etc., and still some more work in Connecticut.
Yeah.
So yep.
Well, that's that's great. Does so you mentioned it, but tell me about the Maker's Mark project, because I actually think that was I saw an article about it, which is why I reached out to you. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Well, that one started. Well, it was 12 years ago. I first had my introduction to do training courses with the Drystone Conservancy at Maker's Mark, whereby we would train trainees there, and also through the weekend visit of the training, we got a chance to look around the distillery. That was part of the package, and it was really nice around about lunchtime. Well, they have got a lot of Drystone work in that area down there I'm saying down there in Loretto. And so from there, they've kept in touch with me over the years. And last September, they asked me if I would be able to build a bridge over Whiskey Creek. And I asked them how many bottles of whiskey were involved. But
is that how you want it to be paid?
That's how the guys got paid at the pyramids. They got paid by beer. Well, things have changed slightly, but in September last year, I was in Scotland visiting my family, and I drew up some sketches, and I knew I had this meeting. And I drew up some sketches, and when I got there, I knew they would ask a price. And I said, well, I thought they might be astonished, so I had to give some comparables. I said, for a 10-foot bridge, it would be probably the price of a brand new Range Rover. But I says, but it'll last a hell of a lot longer than a Range Rover.
That's true.
So I was trying to give some comparison to prices there, and I thought that maybe hit home. Well, anyway, it wasn't a 10-foot bridge. It was a 20-foot bridge.
Oh, my goodness.
We couldn't get the height. If you can do a single span, no problem with 20 foot tall, but you wouldn't get the ADA compliance, for the disability for wheelchairs, etc., going across. So I thought I need to plan this for a double barrel bridge. Well, it's quite apt because of the barrels down there, etc. So the double barrel was a well-named name for the bridge. So we put some sketches together, and they accepted it and said, when can you start? So we started in January. But it's not as simple, because we wouldn't need the planning permission, etc. if it's just one abutment on one side and one on the other. But because we were impeding into the waterway, into the creek, we needed a permit from the state. So we had to call in a good friend of mine, who was one of my trainees at one point, was an engineer, Keith Holtz. So when he came on board, he took my sketches and polished them up absolutely beautifully, and made it ADA compliant. That was just the icing on the cake right there. He made a fantastic job, and they presented that to the state and to Maker's Mark, and it was accepted without any trouble. So then we had to get the stone organised. Now, that particular project, because it's sensitive there with the buildings and the historic fabric of the whole place, we didn't want to cut and mess stone and make noise and dust, etc. down there at Maker's Mark. So we got a good majority of the stone, probably 60% of it was actually fabricated off-site. And then when the stone came, it actually sped the process, it speeded it up. It expedited the whole thing, because we did very minimal amount of work once the stone was on site. And then from there, we just run with the plans, and we had to cope with floods in the very first week. We had 8-degree temperatures for 2 weeks. We had 5 inches of snow, and then we had 80 degrees of heat before we got the bridge finished. So we were there a total of 70 days, and I think we had everything that Mother Nature could throw at us.
Sounds like it.
But the strange thing is, though, because we were prepared, we knew the forecast, and we could cover the site with concrete blankets and plastic sheeting. So we were the only contractor at one point working on that particular site, because nobody else could work because of the temperatures. But with dry stone, we were very fortunate.
Yeah, you don't need to worry about mortar. Yeah,
exactly. That's it. So it wasn't very nice to work in, but we could still progress. So that's what it's not our first rodeo. So but no, it's fantastic. So the bridge is not finished yet. We still have the ADA railing to go on.
Okay.
it's got LED lighting on it, and there's 4 small pillars, and they have coach lights that go on the top, and
Oh, that's nice.
it's are going to be absolutely beautiful once it's finished.
Yes.
And floodlights from the creek side as well, floodlighting it.
Oh yeah, that'll be beautiful.
Oh, now here's a nice little story as well that I'm famous for my stories, but this is a true one. We just heard last week that a couple recently proposed actually on the bridge.
Oh, did they?
Oh, yeah. So I did ask if they accepted, like, but I never heard.
Fingers crossed.
There you go. So building bridges in many ways, eh?
Yes. So, are there some common misconceptions about dry stone masonry?
I think the biggest one probably is that people think it's a dying trade. And that is probably the biggest misconception I can think of, because there is a huge revival all over the country, in fact, all over the world. And I think it's because of the media attention nowadays as well, and the internet, etc.
Right.
And the Stone Trust up in the Northeast, they're doing a fantastic job with their training, and they're providing the most incredible workshops. It's the same back down here in Kentucky, and the Stone Foundation as well in New Mexico. So they're providing all this knowledge and training and passing on the knowledge. And I think that's what's most important, because we want to try and encourage young people to come into the craft.
Right.
I know it's labor intensive, but myself getting older in years now, that who's going to be there in the future to take on board and take on the baton to keep going from there. So it's up to us who have the knowledge to pass on that knowledge, and that's what I thrive upon. I couldn't get enough knowledge when I was starting in the process, and I have actually seen there's a slight improvement. There's a lot of young people coming into it.
That's great.
But you've got to be, self-disciplined, I suppose, and turn up really and get on with it. But no, I think that's the biggest misconception. Another one is, I think people, when they see the complexity of it, they relate it to a jigsaw. But that's another misconception, because a jigsaw, there's only one way to put the jigsaw together.
Right.
And you have a picture before you start. It's not always that you have a picture in dry stone work. You might have an architect's drawing, etc. That's fine. But it's more of a puzzle, because you can have this puzzle that can be put together a million different ways by a different master craftsman or different tradesman, and it could still be technically correct. But with the jigsaw, you've only got the one way to put it together. But so the stonework is more of a puzzle than a jigsaw, because there are so many ways to put it together. So that, I think that's the other misconception there. Maybe the final one, it's another minor detail, but people think that it's just one stone. When they look at it, they only see one face of it.
Yeah.
But the wall has a body to it, and it has a batter. The batter is this angle of repose that keeps it strong. It has like an A shape, really, if you break down the cross section.
Right.
So that, looking as a member of the public or a lay person looking at it, you think, oh, that's just one stone. Some walls actually have one stone going all the way through, but that's a different style, a different technique.
Right.
But once you get into the training and see the concept of how the wall is built, then you have a different understanding for it.
Yeah.
And but no, once again, it's just a fascinating trade and craft. And I think if I could add at this point is, when I left Scotland, I started my business in 1992 from a hobby, and probably 95% of it was agricultural based. It was for farmers and landowners from the farming community. Now, 10 years later, when I came back, when I came over to the United States here, it was only probably about 5% of my work was agricultural. And now we're working with architects, engineers, there's stone art as well. You've got Andy Goldsworthy. Dan Snow is a fantastic example of a tremendous artist who is using stone. Dan designs and also builds the features himself. He's a true artist. So we're into art now as well. So there's all these different facets of stonework, and it's pretty incredible, I think. So it's pretty incredible. It's a great craft, I think.
Yes, it is. I know you were talking about earlier about when you were working in agriculture and it being, you could get the straight rows but it didn't stay, but this really has permanence. And there's really, I think of that quote of, that these are the stones that my forefathers have touched, or, however that goes. But, it really does make me think of that connection throughout time.
There is a nice thing there, actually, just mentioned there, Danielle, that when I'm working on any restoration projects or preservation projects, one of the things that goes through my mind is who touched the stone before me?
Right.
Because when I build a new feature and I design it, like the bridge, I designed that myself and we built it with a team. It's my signature or the mason signature that we're working with. We're actually cutting and dressing the stone ourselves.
Right.
But when we're doing preservation work, this is fantastic to think, well, they didn't have steel cap boots probably. They didn't have canopies to work in.
Right.
And the conditions are probably horrific. And the amount they get paid is probably still much the same as today. No, I'm just joking. But no, seriously though, I'm always wondering, was it an old person? Was it a young person?
Right.
There is a wall that I built, repaired, sorry, in where was it? New York State. It was in Hyde Park for the FDR property, National Park Service there. One side of the wall is beautifully built, absolutely beautiful. And then on the other side, it's not seen by the public. I would class it to be substandard. So to me, it looks as if an apprentice had to start somewhere and he was working on the other side.
On the back side.
Exactly. So, and then the place and the side and the stone that was going to be seen by the public and all these very influential people was it's dressed to the client, so to speak. So they had all the nice to look at, the nice side to look at. That's fascinating.
That makes sense to me though, because if you put the work that's not exactly up to par in the back, most people won't see it.
Yep.
And then you get your training in.
Well, we've all got to start somewhere. I mean, I think the Drystone Conservancy has just celebrated their 25th anniversary. So 25 years of training. The Drystone Walling Association of Great Britain, they started in 1968. So over the years, things have changed, things have been modified, but there's stone structures in Scotland that are over 3,000 years old, and same with the pyramids are 5,000 years old. The Drystone Conservancy and DSWA weren't about in them days.
Talk to me a little bit about the trends and challenges that you see in preservation.
The biggest thing I've noticed in the last few years is, in fact, there's a fine example at Maker's Mark. Myself, through the Drystone Conservancy, did a repair, and this repair, when it is finished, is almost unnoticeable, because what we rely on is the philosophy of preservation. And when you're working in stonework, there is what we call character defining features. And when we take a mossy coloured stone off the wall, you want to put the stone back to respect the old stonemasons. Now, I can hear people saying now, but that might be different. But 90% of the time, the stone goes back the way it was taken off the wall. And this is where you have to use your own integrity and your own discipline to say, well, this stone was not put in the right way. So you might have to change it another way to put it back in. It's got structural integrity. From there, there has been a recent repair, and they use it as an example. They said, this is what happens when Neil's not here. And you can see every stone that's been put in has got a different colour, it's different shape, and it really does not respect the old stonemason's work, actually. And so this is the biggest problem I think I see with challenges, and that's not just in stonework. But you want to try and, I'll give you an example again, worked with the Park Service in the Corwin Barn in New York State many years ago. And the guy there taught me to say, Neil, we need to put the stone up vertical and it needs to go back in this way. Excuse me. And I said, I can't do that or I'll get struck off. And they said, no, Neil, you're respecting the old stonemasons. This is called the philosophy of preservation. So that totally is a huge education for me.
Right.
And when we work with the Park Service, it's technically like a 4-day course, an instructor course on it. And from that philosophy of preservation, there is what they call the significance, integrity, location, and that might be something like where the stonework is in the Tetons, the history, architectural analysis, the period of significance. I mentioned the character defining features and also the treatment recommendations as well. So all these things come into play with the preservation, and you probably heard the terminology of rehabilitation is different from reconstruction, restoration, and preservation. So I think this is where if you start working in preservation, particularly in stonework, from my point of view, is that it would be really nice if there had been a wee bit more education for anyone doing stonework to go through one of these courses, if it was possible. Because I think it's a fantastic process. Again, the history of America is so small. You've only got a couple of 100 years.
Right. Yeah, we don't have, in perspective, we don't have a lot.
Well, given the National Park Service, some of their criteria is, if anything's over 50 years old, then it becomes historic.
Right.
So that means I must be prehistoric. So, but from there though, there is what they call in the Park Service as the 106 process. I don't know if you came across it, 106, so you're aware of that. So that actually helps. That's a starting point. If you go to a client and said, have you been through the 106 process? They've looked into the historic fabric. Is there any historic pictures? A fine example is the Sunken Road in Fredericksburg, Virginia. And we worked there and there was nothing to help us there apart from some pictures. So they went back and they looked at the old historic pictures, and this is what we had to replicate. And all this, there were no stone on site. And it was then I was educated into what they call as the Waddell scale of roundness. And I had never came across this before. Yeah. So that was to tell you what size of stone it was and the gauge of it. And so that was new to us. When we finished, they put an overlay of our work on a picture over the overlay of the old historic pictures, and it was absolutely unbelievable. So we used this 106 process to help us replicate what was there before. And another thing with most of the Park Service we work with, it's fine to go and do the job and the project, but if you go to the visitor centre and see the interpretive videos they have, especially the Sunken Road, when we went to see it, it had a whole different perspective because of the thousands and thousands of people who had lost their lives on a particular wall there. So it wasn't just a wall, and that's another thing about all the projects. Every project has a sensitivity to it. It has an atmosphere as well when you're working there.
Right.
But getting back to the philosophy of preservation, it's a fantastic process. I just wish there was a wee bit more education there for. I don't know if it works in the other trades throughout the Park Service or in the preservation throughout America, but I think it's a very sensitive area actually. I really do.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that a lot of the education is people have to seek it out. It's not just it's not there's not just one way to do it. You have to find multiple ways to get training or to understand the preservation process and terminologies. Yeah, I did. I learned most of mine, working within the business. My education degrees are in business. So like so I learned all of the Park Service terminology and all of that by actually working and doing. And I think that there are more programs available, but when I was starting out there weren't as many as there are now.
Yep. No, that's good. And I think this is I mentioned earlier there about the IPTW, the International Preservation Trades Workshop with the PTN.
That's a great organization.
Absolutely. It was actually through it in 2010, because of all the training I'd done throughout the years, I was presented with the Askins Achievement Award, and that was in 2010. And so that was a great honour to receive that for all the training I'd done throughout the States. And one of the things I do respect over here, now I've got to be careful what I say here, because sometimes there's a little professional jealousy in the trades, maybe in Scotland, etc. It's a bit more complacent with the, how can I put this, with the advancement of the historical stonework, because we have so much history in Scotland.
Right, yeah.
But over here, there's a lot of respect for each other's trade here in America. And I think from blacksmithing, timber framing, painting, lead work, everything, it is fantastic over here, the respect that each person has for the trades. And we can learn from each other as well.
Yes.
Because even if I'm doing a foundation of stonework, we've got to think, is there a carpenter coming behind us? Is there a timber framer, etc.? And then he's thinking about the next person. So having a respect there, and whether even an electrician or a plumber.
Right.
So I think there is a tremendous respect over here for the trades. I think that's fantastic. I like that. I really do like it.
Yeah.
Over here for that
Yeah,
reason.
that's an interesting perspective, because yeah, we do. I've at least when we work with other people, we try to make sure that we're doing things that make things easier. And I'm glad to hear that you see that all over.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, did you before we go through our wrapping up questions, was there anything that you thought of that you wanted to share that maybe I forgot to ask you, or that you thought of while we were talking?
Well, I think with the media that we have nowadays, there's a lot of workshops and training out there.
Yes.
I'd like to try and encourage youngsters to come out there and go on to training. And it's normally, I would say, normally a 5-year apprenticeship. Now, that's the broad term there, but someone could actually do get through all the certifications within 3 years with a lot of dedication. Right. And some people, with all due respect, some people never get there. But again, I would like young people not to be frightened to come into this hard work. It's very rewarding. Yeah. And get some training. Not only the training comes also with certification. So it's another feather in your cap. It's another piece of education, and it can actually have a financial benefit as well. So if you're applying for a job and you're a basic level certification person, or if you're a master craftsman, you're obviously going to get paid more if you went through the certification process. So there's also an incentive there for the trainees. And when we're working with a team, if I have to organize a team, then it's pro rata, for their money. So there's an incentive there, and I think it should be a self-awareness, and it's a professional development, for them to move on. But it takes a special person to do that, and but to let them know that there is the availability out there to train and get trained, and whether it's, I'll give you an example that my experience throughout the years with agriculture, took on a project with the National Park Service. Now it relied on doing concrete. Laying concrete, putting in cement blocks, concrete blocks, cinder blocks, brickwork, flat work. I did landscaping, stonework. We did the flat cap finish. We did the lighting, mulching, seeding. We did everything, and I was a general contractor on that particular project. Now, if that was offered to some people, say, no, I only do dry stonework. Right. Well, if you keep your options open, then the availability to understand these different trades and work with it. The only thing I didn't do was the asphalt and the chip seal. I had to get a contractor in to do it. But then again, you're pulling in an expertise of that trade. Yeah. Because there's temperature control. Even the chip seal has got to go down after it's the asphalt is sealed up. So it's just, once again, it's just all the protocol that goes into it. But that's what I would finish off with, in saying that to encourage young people to come into the craft.
Yes, I agree with you. I do agree.
It's not for everybody. It has to be like a passion. It's got to come from inside. Yeah. My own son, actually, at 16, I would have liked for him to come into the trade. But he was on scaffolding at 16. He was shivering. He had a hard hat on, and he had some packing. Oh, no. Yeah. And I said to him, "This is not for you, is it?" And he says, "Nah."
Yeah, I have my uncle was a framer, and his son was with him like over the summer, helping him frame when he was like probably in middle school, and he fell off the roof. And he was fine, thankfully. But after that, he was done. He wasn't doing that again. And I think you have to know your limits.
Well, I think, when I look back now, I think my son, I think he made the right choice, because he's now got 3 houses, and he prices jobs in fiber optics. That's his occupation now. Now at 16, he's now 38, and he's pricing jobs with fiber optics at 575 million.
Oh my goodness!
He's in one of the most up-to-date technological jobs, and I'm still in the Stone Age.
Oh, but yours probably needs less updating.
So just one last story there. I could tell you that many years ago, a good friend of mine, Nick Aitken, with this customer from Seattle. This is what brought us across the States in the first place. And Nick said to me, he said, "Neil, we need to get to the United States." And I said, "Well, Nick, you know my price." And he says, "I'm going to go for nothing because I just want to go." I said, "That's up to you." Well, when we got there, when we got there, we built this 210 feet in I think it was 11 days, and it was just stone that was from a quarry, and the owner just let us into his house, and he looked after us. Well, one of the Wednesdays we were there, lo and behold, we had a 6.8 earthquake when we were there.
Oh, goodness.
We could see the ground move under our feet. I had never experienced anything quite like it.
Right.
It was pretty incredible. And but the stonework, this is one of the benefits of dry stonework. It has flexibility, and the stonework was unaffected whatsoever.
Oh, that's exciting.
Although in Seattle there was I think it was $2 billion worth of damage because of the old buildings weren't prepared for it.
Oh, yeah.
So even 20 years ago, with the technology, we sent an email back to Scotland, and we're both from Scotland. So we titled the email, "Scots on the Rocks, Shaken but Not Stirred."
That's funny. Oh, but that's truly a testament to the flexibility, and because I think most people would think if it's dry stone and there's nothing holding it together, that it's just going to crumble. And so that's really a testament to the craft.
Well, the two fundamentals with dry stonework are friction and gravity, and that's why it's built like a pyramid. And even with a round stone, you can exaggerate the batter. That's the angle repose again.
Oh, yeah.
So make it wider. It's a bit like building with potatoes, but the same concept. So it's all relative how you work with it, but it does speak to you. So that's it. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Well, very good. Did you have any offers for our listeners? Anything you'd like to promote?
Not really. Nothing I can think of.
That's fine. Okay.
So.
How can our listeners get in touch with you?
Probably by email is probably my best way, actually. And you've got my email address.
I do. We'll make sure that it is on the website. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. No, that's fantastic, Danielle. Yeah. Really appreciate
very
it.
Good. Thank you very much for taking the time to speak with me today.
No problem. So I'll see you at St. Clairsville in September. Right?
Oh yes, hopefully.
PTN, Preservation Trades Network. Yes. Thank you very much, Danielle. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. Yes.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Practical Preservation Podcast. The resources discussed during this episode are on our website at practicalpreservationservices.com/podcast. If you received value from this episode and know someone else that will get value from it as well, please share it with them. Join us next week for another episode of the Practical Preservation Podcast. For more information on restoring your historic home, visit practicalpreservationservices.com.